the entrance of the new professional women's rugby league, Women's Elite Rugby. Y'all, y'all. This one I am so very, very hyped for and have so many expectations for this one. Because one, I'll be honest with you, I knew about this happening, I think probably almost 2 months ago. I think a lot of people, it wasn't the best kept secret in the world, but you know, I know people that are working on this, and this was something that was starting to build up for a little bit. I think we were seeing the elements of it coming out of the WPL, because of the fact that you know, what we saw with MLR. Now is time to be able to see what could be done with the women's side as well. But that being said, it looks like it's finally arrived, announced itself. It's expected to be able to start in 2025. A lot of people have already talked about this, but you know, the question is, what is the sustainability and capability that it can have? Because we are really looking at a lot of the what growing pains that happened with the MLR. Speaking of which, Blue Sox, shout out to you, Blue Sox, said the WER, the women's wing of the MLR, nope, not a part of the MLR ownership. They are a separate league working under their own separate union-owned separate administration. By the way, shout out to one of our guests, former Howard University women's rugby coach and Howard University Women's Rugby Director of Rugby, Catherine Aversanu. You can actually check out an interview of hers on our podcast here. I don't remember the episode number, but definitely go check it out. She was announced as the vice president for the Women's Elite Rugby. She's already been doing great things with Women's Premier Rugby, already doing great things with the Women's Rugby Foundation. So this is another big step forward for her. So shout out to her. But no, this is not connected with the MLR. And I think that's really, really important to know, because obviously we talked about this earlier. Oftentimes when a women's league is created, it is created as an offset of what the men's side is doing. So basically they share their same resources, but subsequently are, you know, really giving scraps. Like let's call a spade a spade. Like we know this. So in this situation, the structure is completely self-contained. Now, the Women's Elite Rugby put a great post, especially in comparison to the WPL, about what is to be taken from this WER and what does it differ from the WPL. So what they said on this over here on LinkedIn, and you guys, let me get you guys over here, of course. What they said on this was, number one, the differences that are done between the WPL and the WER. Obviously, the WPL, first and foremost, is a nonprofit because of the fact that it works within the club systems. It is not a It is not a part of the. Hold on a second, I lost it. Here, okay, there we go. It is not a part of any pay for model. It is a pay to play. It is Elite D1 club rugby for women, but it is not professional. I currently have 7 teams. You know, season starts April 27th, which is next week. It's run basically through grants and donations and such, yada, yada, yada. Whereas WER is a for-profit, player-paid, dedicated staff, single entity professional model. Now, what does it mean to be a single entity? It means that the WER is following a model that allows rugby to be universally marketed to consumers rather than each team market doing what they're able to afford. So basically, they're following a method that is much more similar to what pro rugby was under, what was his name? Schroeder, a few years back. Centralized funding, centralized pool where the league owns the teams, and then the teams subsequently are funded from that pool. I think Premier Rugby Sevens, and if I'm not getting that wrong, absolutely correct me, but Premier Rugby Sevens runs a very similar gamut where the individual teams might have sponsors or funders, but it's basically funded from the inside out. But I might be wrong on that one. But I know definitely pro rugby back in 2016 was definitely within that model. Also within the funding, obviously they're going to try and make it in the better way that they know, media deals, corporate sponsorships, merchandising, ticket sales. And then in terms of what is it going to impact the value of the WPL, which I think a lot of people are going to be worrying about because the WPL has been around for so long. Been around for so long, but I think like it impacted MLR, impacted D1 men's rugby, it's going to end up being the same way with WPL. And what they said is, as a conversation is ongoing, the value of the WPL is going to be as a pathway towards professionalization, as well as coast to coast pay to play a model, because they feel like the coast to coast pay to play model is not sustainable. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, what you see from what you're going to get from the WPL or from programs like that is going to always be limited because of the fact that it's difficult to shift up these bases to professional, because obviously one shifting into terms. So if you're already as a 501c3 and moving to an LLC, that plays a lot in tax issues. Number two, perception. Like there's a mental game that goes along with that. And it plays into what players get picked up and get played. And number three, like it does change. We saw with the MLR, they tried to do it off from club teams and ultimately had to separate into separate entities for themselves for one reason or the next. Blue Sox commented, it will be interesting to see how WER develops. MLR just lost to Toronto Arrows, my team, and apparently Rugby ATL moved to LA and is now RFC LA. Do you know more about it? So with this one, again, knowing the guys that have been a part of it, that are a part of it, they really have been paying attention to what's going on with the MLR. Now, their intent is to be able to raise money. I think that's first and foremost, to be able to raise money for the sustainability team. There's a lot of expertise that's going along with it. On the other side of it, though, there is still the challenge of being able to build a sustainable model. I do believe that they're going to look at something that is similar to what they're doing in Argentina. And if you guys get a chance, check out our past episode. You can find it on YouTube with Eusebio Guniezu. He talked about how Argentina's model basically works as the premier level, the elite level is where most of the money goes into. And then players are able to transition to regional areas. Basically, each of these places have a regional ground for their network of players, and they use their elite services to be able to help guide players. So professional players become coaches and mentors. The regional sites are used to develop younger elite athletes and younger potential athletes as well, and be able to consistently create a source where all the teams that are under the region of that professional team utilize the professional team as a source for materials, a source for education, as a source for scouting. And so I think what we'll see happen with this, at least at the beginning, is that the women's elite rugby are going to end up finding themselves as regional scout and development for the youth. And that should help develop their community and help develop their plan. Shout out to Mick Feely with really talking a lot about that. My guy Abel Rosa said, I truly believe WER will do good. I feel like it will be the only professional full contact sport for women like the NFL, but for women, if that makes sense. Obviously, in the USA, because obviously Western Europe has the women's premiership rugby that is currently going on and is what's making England a super powerhouse team. USA Rugby League and Union fan says MLR is losing a lot of cash. WER will be hemorrhaging cash. You are absolutely correct. 100% will absolutely hemorrhage cash. Both of these teams, I hope, work in conjunction with each other to be able to develop, while not, again, sharing necessarily the resources, but really sharing on developing the community, because developing that community element and developing casual fans are going to be a really big asset. I will say this though, and I think I've noticed this very heavily when it comes to women's rugby. And I talked about this with some of the other interviewees, and I've talked about this behind the scenes. But I do believe that the women's side has done an improved job in being able to create a media presence for themselves online, and that plays very heavily into connecting out with the community. You know, a lot of what you've been able to see, like a lot of what the women's side has had to do because of the fact that they weren't getting normal coverage from the men's side, has been a factor of trying to formulate their own identity. And I think when it came to social media, obviously we've seen players like Ileana Marr and Charlotte Caslick, Portia Woodman really be able to see their stardom skyrocket because of their social media. And I think because of that, World Rugby, especially World Rugby Council, and especially the women's rugby side, really started running with that. And I think the WELR will be able to take advantage of that same element. Now, I do feel like they're going to have to be very guerrilla with what they're doing. And I think the one thing that they're not going to be able to do with that MLR did is be more timid about what happens off the field. I think with MLR, they focus so much about their on-field product that they really let loose on what happened off the field. And so some of those connections that in cities like Atlanta, where they had a huge celebrity community that they could have tapped into that would have been interested. And I know this personally would have been able to be interested in it. Or right now, what they have in LA with everything that's happening. LA is a sports town that cares whenever you care. And I think we're starting to see little tidbits here and there with the social media teams, but I think that the WER is going to have to over leverage on marketing outside and jump on the wave of what's going on with women's basketball, jump on the wave of women's soccer, and really find a way to connect these pieces together as opposed to try and be an opposing force, because otherwise it's going to hemorrhage a lot of money and it's going to be very difficult to bring it back. The other thing that's a really disadvantage that right now they would simply not be able to do is stadium. This is a lot of where the hemorrhaging of money happened with MLR. So like using a team like Houston SaberCats, one of the biggest advantages that Houston SaberCats have is that they have their own stadium. That stadium for pro teams is where the money truly is made. It's not off of the games initially. It is off of the events you get to put on it. It's off of the concessions you get to get from it. It's off of the merchandise and the stabilization. New Orleans Gold kind of has a situation like that, but they kind of rent it from the city still. So they still have to give out money, but they do have a lot more control over it. But that being said, the gold mine is a shared city stadium. So come the off season, obviously the Gold have a more hands off on that stadium, and on other teams, whether it's baseball team or whether it's other events, those get, if I remember correctly, held on by the city itself. So it's difficult to hold a pro team when you don't have a stadium, but obviously stadiums cost millions, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions if you want one that's up to date. So finding a way around that and finding ways to be able to compensate for those stadiums are going to be a big deal, especially as you are trying to build your fan base. And of course, this is all supposed to help lead into 2031 Rugby World Cup in the USA. I wonder if World Rugby is going to try and invest into the WER like they've invested into MLR with the anthem. Though I don't know if that would be a good use of money. But like you said, USA Rugby League and Union fan, this is not going to be a situation where money is going to be profitable anytime soon, because it's already hard enough in the niche against rugby as a women's sport, and then subsequently as a new pro sport in the women's element. But as Abel Rosa said, it's a full contact fully professional league for women. There is women's semi-pro American football, but it's semi-pro. Abel Rosas said they should copy the last World Cup and just stack the shipping containers for it. Yo, yeah, just wrap it up all the way around it, and yeah, I mean, yo, feel the dream style, baby, feel the dream style. Blue Sox said after the Giltinis went away, it was promising to see another rugby team back in LA. Yeah, I mean, look, the situation with the MLR also was really convoluted. Like the reason they Rugby ATL had to move because the owner died. The reason why Toronto Blue Arrows had died is because the owner died. The LA team, the original one with the Giltinis, and obviously that also impacted the Gilgronis in Austin, is because freaking the owner basically had a Ponzi scheme of a company in F45. Like, I think in New Jersey I've seen still one gym, but like him and Mark Wahlberg had, that whole company went to pieces once it went public. So, there are other extenuating circumstances on top of the obvious financial ones that are going on. But in terms of MLR, I've always said I think this year MLR had to do it because of the amount of losses that they took. I think there's a pride thing, and I think they'll get their stuff straight. And then with the WER, again, it's just going to be about the challenges and about the support and about really, really pushing the marketing. They have to be guerrilla. They have to be guerrilla. If you go in a traditional marketing way, this will fail. This will absolutely fail. WPL will still exist, but this iteration will absolutely, absolutely fail if they do not go in non-traditional formats of marketing and communicating with people. So let me know what you guys think about it, man. What's your thoughts on the WER? Where do you think the possibility is with it? And what do you think that they have to be able to gain from this? I mean, I think obviously they got a lot to gain. Professionalization, regular play, that's always going to be a big deal. And obviously with Premiership Rugby, that'll be both codes having a professional rugby side. But again, we'll see what it works. See what happens. Don't follow Europe. Whatever you do, don't follow Europe.
Don't you love a great ketogenic family? My name is Gifte Belu. I'm here with Health Enhanced Food. I wanted to talk to you about one of our top baking mixes, and that is our ketogenic baking mixes. We got our ketogenic seed baking mix, our ketogenic almond baking mix, and of course, our ketogenic coconut baking mix. Now, what is so important about it being ketogenic? Now, for those who don't know, ketogenic means that it is utilizing low carbs to be able to eat from. The point of it is so that your body will naturally activate burning from your fat and be able to sustain off your proteins rather than feeding your body carbohydrates and your body simply burning that and you just don't lose weight. And so whenever you're doing that process, it's incredibly difficult. And of course, you're always going to have a craving for wanting to eat the breads and the carbs that you typically would have. With our keto baking mixes, you can have the pancakes, the waffles, the cookies, the cakes, the pizza crust that you absolutely desire without sacrificing the work, your diet, and obviously the results that you're trying to get. All our ketogenic baking mixes are gluten-free, grain-free, plant-based, and absolutely loaded with natural vitamins and minerals. We want to make sure that they are low net carb, they have no added sugar, they are protein rich, they have good healthy fats, but even more importantly, they have a low glycemic level. So for those who are diabetic and you're also still trying to find something, we have the baking mixes that are for you. And I'm sure you're wondering, why make 3 versions of them if they all are basically doing the same thing? Well, we wanted to make sure, as always, that we are trying to specialize to your dietary need. So with our ketogenic coconut, we wanted to give you a version that allows you to have a sweeter bread without sacrificing your diet. But it provides you things that you can make with your cakes, you can make your cookies, but you can be able to not have to lose your mind trying to find things that can satiate the taste without ruining your diet. With our ketogenic almond baking mix, that is one that has probably the highest protein content It allows you to be able to control your blood sugar levels, reduce your blood pressure, lower cholesterol levels, and of course, it goes to promoting weight loss and being able to control the hunger. And for our ketogenic seed, this is for those who have a nut allergy and they can't take anything like the almonds. So we want to give them still the same thing. You can still make your bread. You can still make your pizza crust. You can still make your cakes and your buns and your muffins, but you don't have to worry about having an allergic reaction. You definitely can go check out the ketogenic line of products at healthenhancedfoods.com. Go ahead, keep up with your diet, get the foods that are necessary to keep you going, and let's get the results that you absolutely deserve. Let's go.